Hi, everyone. Just a reminder that you should turn on your video when it's your turn to speak. Thank you. Hi, Dr. Pandawe. Dr. Pandawe, can you hear me?
Hello. Yes, I can hear you.
How are you this afternoon?
I'm well, thank you.
I'm fine, thanks. Just a quick one. When it's your turn to speak, I'm likely going to start with you. So you're required to switch on your video when it's your turn to speak.
Okay. So I'll see. Okay, fine. I'll switch on my video. I'm just 2 minutes away. I have to collect kids from school, so I'll be accessible in 2 minutes. Yes, that's why.
Okay. No problem. I'll be doing introductions in the first 2 minutes.
Fine.
So you should have time to settle down. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our today's webinar. I'm your host, Chikondi Chijozi. I am from Southern Africa Litigation Center, and I work as a criminal justice lead. It's a great honor to have all of you joining in. And also, I would like to say a special welcome to our panelists. We are lucky this afternoon. We have great legal minds and activists that would help us with our discussion this afternoon. So you're most welcome, and we're looking forward to having a special time with you this afternoon. And before I introduce our panelists, I would like just to explain why we're here. I know some of you would have looked at the poster and you know what the topic is about. But today we'll be discussing the criminalization of attempted suicide because this is an issue that is not only in a few countries in Africa, but in many other countries across the world. And it's a problem that has been there for so many years. And just to give you a background in terms of the offense of attempted suicide, the offense of attempted suicide can be traced way back as the 5th century in Europe, where the British colonial office introduced the offense in its colonies. In England itself, self-murder was regarded as a sin against God, a sin against the king, and also a sin against nature. So there are about 20 countries across the world that still criminalize attempted suicide, and the penalties for the offense of attempted suicide range from 1 to 3 years. Of course, there have been progress that has been made over the years. Recently, we have 9 countries that have decriminalized attempted suicide. So we have countries like India, Rwanda, Lesotho, Ghana, that have actually decriminalized attempted suicide. But then we have so many other countries that still criminalize attempted suicide, countries like Gambia, Kenya, Somalia, South Sudan, and many others, including Malawi, because we have our Malawian colleagues on the panel as well. So that's why we are here, and also considering that today is a special day where we're looking at mental health. So without taking much of your time this afternoon, I would like to introduce our panelists that will help us expound on this important topic. Firstly, I would like to welcome Justice Sizoni Ntaba. She's a judge of the High Court in Malawi. She's actively involved as a member of the Women Judges Association of Malawi, focusing on providing legal advice to women and children, holding legal clinics, and offering mentorship programs. Justice Ntaba serves on several international and national boards, including her role as the chairperson of the Women's Association of Sports in Malawi and her membership in the Women in Sports Committee of the African Union Sports Council region. Welcome, Justice Sizoni Ntaba.
Thank you.
Our second panelist is Justice Wanjiku Cherere. I hope I pronounced your name right, my lady. So Justice Cherere has served as a judge of the High Court for 6 years in Kenya, and she also has previously served as a magistrate. Welcome to the webinar, Judge Cherere. And our third panelist is Dr. Chiwoza Bandawe. Dr. Bandawe is a professor in the Department of Psychiatry and Mental Health at Kamuzu University of Health Sciences in Malawi. He is a clinical psychologist who has also lectured at the University of Cape Town. As a practicing psychologist, he opened his own clinic called Harmony Mental Wellness Solutions in Malawi. He has also published 3 mental health education books. His first book, which was published in 2005, is called Mind Tips, A Psychology of Practical Living Skills for Malawi. His second book he published in 2006. It's called Mind Tools to Sharpen Your Mental Health. And his third book he published in 2010, it's called Practical Umuntu Psychology. You're most welcome, Dr. Chiwoza Bandawe.
Thank you very much.
Our fourth panelist is Ogechi Ugu, who is the Deputy Director of Prisoners Rehabilitation and Welfare Action, shortly known as PRAWA, and the National Coordinator of Olive Justice Development Initiative. Ogechi has managed various PRAWA projects, including the decriminalization of petty offences in Nigeria. She has worked on several initiatives targeted at addressing issues of retrial detention and decongestion of prisons in Nigeria. So I see that she has not yet joined, but if we get her online, she will be part of the discussion. So I'll introduce our last panelist, who is Heria Seidu. Sorry if I didn't pronounce your name right. So she is a program officer in the Access to Justice Department at the Commonwealth Human Rights Initiative Africa office. She is a practicing lawyer in Ghana with experience in litigation, private practice, and human rights. Her work focuses on police reform and prison reform, pretrial detention as well. She's very passionate about the rights of women and children. We welcome you to this webinar area. Okay, thank you so much, our panelists. We don't have much of time, so we will go straight into our discussion. And we'll start with you, Dr. Bandawe. You can start the discussion by just giving us a general context of mental health and attempted suicide. And you can also talk on other factors such as social and economic factors leading to suicide ideas. Dr. Chiwaza Bandawe.
Thank you very much. Right, so I'm told I cannot start my video because the host has disabled it. So I think once I'm able to, but I will go ahead. Oh, okay, I can start my video. There we go. Can you see me?
Yes, Dr. Bandawe, we can see.
Right, thank you. So the first thing to say is that we do know that about 703,000 people a year attempt suicide. It's a major health or public health issue or public health concern. We also know that for every suicide that is actually completed, about 20 others attempt suicide. So we are speaking of millions of people who are involved in suicidality. And when we are speaking of suicidality, generally we are speaking of the thoughts that people may have about taking their own life, the actions that they may actually engage in. And we also know that 77% of global suicides actually occur in low and middle income countries, the vast majority. And that more women than men attempt suicide, but more men, 3 times more men than women, complete their suicide. Most of the suicides are due to ingestion of pesticides, hanging, firearms. Those are quite common. The factors that lead people to suicide is varied, a wide range. It's never a linear thing. It's a combination of psychological factors, the way you engage with the world, the interpretations that you make, the stress and the pain and the distress, combined with social factors, cultural factors, economic factors. So they all come together to basically contribute towards this thing called suicide. Now, suicide itself is not a mental disorder. It is actually an indication of a desperate cry for help or of intense pain that a person is going through, that they feel that they have no option but to actually take their life. So you are dealing with people who are in a space of utter despair. And in fact, one of the things that we know is that they've said that those who commit suicide actually don't want to die. They just want the pain to stop, but they don't know how to go about that. So it is something that just doesn't affect the individual, obviously, but even impacts the family, the community, because they are left with despair, with guilt about the intensity of the act. Hello, should I go on or?
Yeah. Oh, are you done, doctor?
Yeah, I mean, right.
Okay.
So I could go on. Now, for every suicide attempt, we do know that actually we find that what society needs to do is to actually address the multidimensionality of it. And we need to have systems in place that basically help a person to have the tools to be able to deal with the pain that they are suffering. But it's not just an individual experience. It is also very much about feeling a sense of community cohesion, because when we talk about mental well-being, we are talking about a person's potential, a person's ability to realize their full potential. We are talking about a person being able to be productive in whatever they are doing, to handle the day-to-day challenges, but also to contribute meaningfully to their society. And when people have a mental disorder or like depression and anxiety or even substance use, that drastically increases the chance of them taking their lives or of having suicidal thoughts and suicidal ideation. So what is needed as much as possible is support for the person, as much support as possible. And that's why the criminalization is really quite harmful, because at every level where you are supposed to support the person through institutions, through the justice system, through the community, by criminalizing, you are removing vital support that a person who is in a state of suicidality is actually going through. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Badawi, for such a beautiful start. One thing that I've picked up strongly from what you've said is that actually criminalization of attempted suicide takes away the vital support that the person needs, and also that attempted suicide is not a mental health status or disability or anything of that sort, but it's a cry for help. So it's really fascinating to hear that from you, because then all of us can go through that process when we are not able to deal with certain situations and we feel we don't have solutions. We can find ourselves in that position. So it's an issue that we need to address and look at whether criminalization is the best solution. And you've already said to us that it is actually harmful. Thank you so much for that introduction. And that takes me to Justice Ntaba. I know, Justice Ntaba, in your previous life, you were a state prosecutor and you have quite extensive experience at the bar as well as on the bench in terms of criminalization and even criminal justice in general. So Justice Ntaba, can you just speak to us on the criminal justice system and the effects on mental health? Over to you, Justice Ntaba.
Thank you. I think it's good that we have the context from a medical perspective because it drives the, you see the lack of it in the criminal justice system itself. Because from a point of view of when you look at the laws themselves, you look at the concept of attempted suicide as an offense. It's in actual fact, it's a misdemeanor, which means it carries with it less than 2 years imprisonment. If you look at aiding suicide, which is also something that is in our law, it is also a misdemeanor, which means it also carries itself a sentence of less than 2 years. But what you realize in the criminal justice system is everybody only looks at the suicide aspect from a point of view of being of unsound mind. If it can be proved that the person was of unsound mind, then do you find them getting away from the actual offense? However, in all the cases that you will find in the country, you will find that no single person has actually looked at the medical perspective to actually prove the concept of whether the person had the necessary, as we're talking in the law, mens rea, to actually commit the offense. Because with a criminal offense, you must have the requisite mental capability to do that. Although the person would have attempted suicide, but the question comes into as to what Dr. Bandawi is talking, was the person depressed? Do they have any other underlying mental health condition which would have caused them to do so? And thereby, in the concept of criminality, they actually fit, come into play in terms of both offenses, the act as well as the mental element. And because of that, you find that people get convicted a lot more because they basically will go before a magistrate and plead guilty. And the magistrate will just take what the facts that a police officer stated, and then after that, they are sentenced. And that's one of the reasons why when we look at the criminal justice issues in terms of its effect on the mental health is that it provides limited spaces, limited opportunities, limited resolution for the mental health aspect, which a person who attempted suicide is actually looking for. That cry for help is worsened in the criminal justice system because we find them guilty and we put them we incarcerate them in a space whereby there'll be no mental health assistance unless a court decides to put them under a reception order and hold them in a mental hospital, which in most circumstances, that doesn't happen. And if you look at, for instance, look at all the cases that I just took a chance to look at, from whether you talk of 1991, I just took into consideration from 1991. None of the mental health issues where there was a suicide, was there a good discussion of the mental health aspect itself? And I just want to highlight how much of that comes into play, not only from the perspective of the prosecutor, because the prosecutor's role is all the time is to bring the cases. They are not even taking into consideration the issues. But I want to start from the police officer. If you look at the concept of the mental health issues, the Mental Treatment Act of Malawi requires that if a police officer finds that somebody is a danger to themselves, which means a person has attempted suicide, it means they're a danger to themselves. They're supposed to take them for safekeeping. And safekeeping would also require them having the powers to actually get them put under a reception order into a mental hospital. But what you find is most police prosecutors would now go and say, we will arrest that person afterwards and charge them. I think I was looking at a paper article of a gentleman who committed attempted suicide in January 2023 in Mangochi. He stabbed himself in the neck with a panga knife. And when the matter was reported to the police, and the police says, oh, we went to see him. We found him unconscious, but when he's better, we're going to prosecute him for attempted suicide. And I'm thinking, why would you do that? Why would you go and then say we're going to prosecute him for attempted suicide? You look at the concept when that person comes into the system, it's in the judiciary. Instead of the judiciary taking into account the mental health aspect, you find that the case that Sauk did in Lilongwe, the biggest issue was the conviction was upheld, and then the person was released with immediate effect, despite that they had been given an 18-month sentence. But there's no other parameters of the mental health aspects that that person was given or the court ordered. Similarly, we have a case in Cheo where a university student had been suspected of stealing chicken from his grandmother. The community chased him away, and he tried to hang himself. When he was arrested, he was tried and charged, and guess what? He was fined 80,000 and in default, imprisonment for 12 months. The parameters of even the criminal justice system is they hardly take into account the mental aspect, the mental health issues, which, if we're going to be a justice system that is responsive to mental health issues, it means we need to start rethinking how we deal with attempted suicide in our systems. And I'm saying that for the fact that we continuously have the inability to emote, but also to take into consideration what it means when a person has attempted suicide. And I just wanted to highlight something that was said in a case whereby a child had been denied the right to terminate a pregnancy where she had attempted suicide. The judge said in that case, there's an attempt to appeal to the court that she attempted. Listen to the words, there's an attempt to appeal to the court that she attempted to commit suicide. It is not clear whether same emanates from lack of support or other such social factors, including pregnancy at hand. And the court goes on to make a finding. The court finds that CM is in a quagmire that the man she thought loved her, despite being a minor who got her pregnant, now denies her any form of support. This is a 15-year-old child who, under any circumstances, this was a sexual offences case, which the whole termination was coming from. But the inability to understand that the attempted suicide is a cry for help and has a very much huge bearing on the issues that are coming into play means that in the criminal justice space, especially for us as a country, we've yet to highlight that as an issue which the criminal justice system needs to look at, and not criminalize it, but find solutions that ensures that people are actually able to get assistance and not just be incarcerated, because the incarceration worsens the mental health condition, especially whether it's depression, schizophrenia, you name it, the reason, or alcoholism, which may also lead to attempted suicide. So from the perspective of the criminal justice system in Malawi, we are yet to take in the mental health aspect, despite that the law does criminalize it, but there's also a very much a correlation that must be taken in terms of the Mental Treatment Act, which says if a person decides to become a danger, the issue is not criminalization, but it is finding the necessary help that they need, whether it's getting them mental treatment or having them placed in treatment at a mental hospital, which is what I think, if I'm not, Dr. Chiwoza will most likely agree with me, that is the best solution as opposed to the criminal aspect. That's what I would say for now, unless Chikondi, you wanted me to go further?
No, thank you so much, Justice Ntaba. I think that takes us to the next question for discussion. And just to recap on the key issues that you've raised, Justice Ntaba, is that when it comes to adjudication on issues of mental health in respect to the offense of attempted suicide, we see that issues of mental health are missing in terms of considerations. So issues of incarceration just worsen the situation, and that the courts need to take into account mental health issues. I think that I can now invite Justice Cherry to just give us a picture of the impact of criminalization of attempted suicide in Kenya. What has been your experience, Judge?
Good afternoon, all. I am sorry I joined late. I was traveling. And as Judge Ntaba has said, the players in the justice sector, the judges, the magistrates, the police, and even the prosecutors in our country have not been fully sensitized on how to handle persons who find themselves with the suicidal tendencies. And as you all know, Kenya criminalizes attempted suicide. And therefore, the first thing that happens when such a person is brought before the courts, or even when they are arrested by the police, they are looked at as criminals and not people that need medical intervention. And therefore, the way they are handled from their home, where the attempt was committed, the time they are taken to the police and to the courts, it is so dehumanizing. And therefore, what happens is that even such a person, when they are arrested and they have attempted suicide and they are taken to hospital, some of them would be tied to their beds to an extent that they will be in hospital getting treatment, and they will be tied to their beds with a policeman keeping watch. And therefore, it is very difficult, and it stigmatizes not just the persons who attempt suicide, but also their families. In Kenya, you find that those who attempt suicide are considered to have committed a taboo, and therefore even it is rarely discussed even on family circles. They would not even want to be associated with such a person, so that you find a person who has attempted suicide is not only ostracized, but he also fails to get support even from the family level. And when they go before the justice system, it is even worse, because if they cannot get assistance from their family members, you can really expect that they will get it before the courts, or even from the policemen. And even in hospital, as much as the doctors and the nurses would be administering treatment, you find that they are not taken care of in the best way possible, because they will be told, you wanted to die, so why should we take care of you? If you want to die, just go ahead and die. And therefore, it stigmatizes them. And therefore, what happens is that even at the family level, when somebody has attempted suicide, the family members would rarely disclose that that is a person who has attempted suicide. And therefore, it becomes very difficult for such a person to get support. And even when they are taken to hospital, their family members would definitely say that either it was an accident, but they would not say that it was attempted suicide. And therefore, it becomes very difficult for such a person to get the help they require. But recently, what we have noticed is that the magistrates and the judges, most of the cases are handled at the magistrates' court cases, and they only go to the High Court on appeal. Recently, our magistrates have been sensitized, not much, and therefore you find that most of the cases that get there, most of them would be convicted, but a few might be lucky and they might be referred to hospital for treatment. But all in all, you find that there's a lot of stigma, both at the family level, in court, and even in the hospitals where they are taken for treatment, and even at the point of preparation of such persons if they are to be taken to court. And therefore, I think, as everyone has said here, it is high time that Kenya, like the other countries, considers decriminalising attempted suicide so that these people can get the help they want, because as we have said, this is a call for help. It is at that point when somebody is feeling distressed and feels hopeless that they want to end their life. That is not the time to take them to jail, but that is the time that they need help, mental help, and they need love and care from those around them, and even those to whom they are subjected, whether it be it in court or even at the police station or even in the hospitals. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Judge, for that experience in Kenya. And I think for all those that are listening, they can actually relate to the issues that you're raising that are coming out from Kenya in terms of people being treated badly in terms of detention, as well as being tied to the bed when they get arrested in the hospital, but also committing suicide being regarded as a taboo, and not even having assistance from family. So those are issues that we can all relate with. And at this point, I would like to hear from Heria in terms of your experience in Ghana. Can you tell us what your experience has been? Heria, over to you.
Hi, everyone. So, like Lady Justice said, the experience in Ghana is very similar because the decriminalization is very recent. We have a lot of people who are constantly stigmatized and discriminated against because of the fact that they have attempted suicide. You realize that there's a lack of education on mental health issues, and for that reason, people don't know how to handle situations like this where people are essentially crying for help. So the situation is very similar here. We don't have the proper mechanisms to take care of these situations, and decriminalizing has been a really great step for us because it opens up the doors. A couple of years ago, we passed the Mental Health Act, and that also helped us with these situations. So yes, that's essentially how the situation is here in Ghana.
Thank you so much, Heria, for that. And I think we can all see that the experiences are similar. I see that Ogechi has joined us. Ogechi, if you're here, you can switch on your mic so I can know that you're here with us. Are you here, Ogechi? Okay, when you're here, please just put a message in the chat so that we can also engage with you on our webinar. Because of time, I'll just want to hear briefly from Dr. Bandawe. If you can just share with us what you think is the role of the public health system in addressing mental health and attempted suicide. Over to you, Dr. Bandawe.
Thank you very much. So when we're speaking about public health systems, basically we are trying to find ways of ensuring that all the help, all the support that can be given to a person who has attempted suicide is there. So that is in terms of, for example, enough staff, enough quality of care, so that the person who has attempted suicide can feel that they are being understood, that they are being helped. And that is very key. So the provision of resources is very important. What tends to happen in public health systems, unfortunately, and public health systems are not just for the individual. It includes reaching out to a community. It includes educating and reaching out to a family of somebody who might have a mental health issue or somebody who has attempted suicide. So the role of public health systems is to ensure that the person who has attempted suicide is heard, the issues are addressed, and specific lines of questioning are actually engaged. So for example, you find that often there's a situation where somebody has attempted suicide, and this has actually happened here in Malawi, where I know someone, a young chap, attempted suicide, and basically when he attempted suicide, the family were told that, okay, we have to report this to the police. Therefore, they were not able to help that person as effectively, because the family were very anxious and were not forthcoming. So that the issue that led that child to attempt suicide was not addressed at all. So public health systems need to ensure that they create an environment that allows us to get to the heart and to the root of the issue. The other thing is that there is need for a very socio-ecological approach that involves a wide range of factors that enables the person to have tools to be able to deal and to address whatever they are going through. Now, if you expect public health personnel to report someone who has attempted suicide, then you will find that families will be very reticent, and where help is needed, it will not be forthcoming because people will be withdrawn because they are afraid. And so the real underlying issue that needs to be addressed will not be addressed. And that's why having those laws actually prevent that from happening. And that therefore means that we are not able to move forward and to address the issue. So with public health systems, you find that a wide variety, a wide range of them are actually not addressing potential issues, because educating communities is part of that. Letting people know, trying to encourage destigmatization is fundamental, so that families should not feel they're stigmatized, that they should be laughed at, they should be isolated, because it is very difficult for them. So we have had situations where you see that families will not give the information. Oh, the rope just happened to be around his neck, he was just playing, you know, being silly and so on, but not addressing the fundamental issue. So public health systems have a very important role to be in the forefront of bringing and effecting change in order to reduce suicide, because it's not just a linear single thing or single event. It's a multiple, it's a compilation of different multiple factors that actually lead somebody to get to a point where they feel, I have to take my life.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bandawe, for that. Yes, I agree with you. We need to find tools to help people who are dealing with mental health issues and thinking of committing suicide, on how to deal with the issues that actually leading to them to have those ideas, as well as also addressing the root cause of why someone attempts to commit suicide. So thank you so much for that. There is a question that has come through the chat, and I would want Justice Ntaba to address that question. Justice Ntaba, there's a question which is saying, how does the issue of assisted suicide intersect with the decriminalization of attempted suicide? And what role do cultural and religious beliefs play in discussions surrounding decriminalizing attempted suicide? Justice Ntaba, take that one up.
A very interesting question, looking at the fact that from the African perspective, culturally, but also from a religious perspective, you will find that the concept of assisted suicide is going to be the most difficult aspect we'll get to decriminalize in our country, despite that other countries have been able to put in assisted suicide as a medical issue, actually, that a person can make a decision about their health, noticing the long-term effects of long-term health problems and all those things. The question is how can we get there, or if how does the issue intersect? I think one of the things we need to realize that it will be very difficult to get aiding suicide, which is the offense in Malawi under Section 228, ever taken out, based on the fact that we'll have a major concern with its interaction with the right to life, unless, as I said, we go through the parameters that other countries have gone through in terms of whether that right to life aspect can be taken away based on a medical clearance. And I think that's where a lot of the other countries have relied on the fact of medical evidence that says a person can be allowed or can be given the ability to commit suicide by themselves and be assisted medically. That is, whether through a hospice or in a hospital, depending on the issues. But I think the legal aspects that go towards that are fundamental and huge, and they will require a lot of time for us to get there. Looking at the fact that we've yet to actually take out attempted suicide as a criminal issue. So I think our first port of call is deal with the attempted suicide as a criminal offense, take it out of the decriminalization, so that we give people the right assistance, that is medically, for them to be able to have better mental health. But for those with long-term health complications, then that would be a different whole discussion, based on the fact that it will no longer be the decriminalization aspect, but it now be an issue for assisted suicide based on medical health issues that a person has actually taken on board, and medically it's been agreed to. And sometimes I know in other countries, even the court has to agree to that medical decision that a person can take their own life in terms of suicide itself. So that's how I would say that the intersection at the moment is going to be difficult based on those parameters, but also the constitutional provisions that a lot of us have vis-a-vis the right to life, in terms of how it's played. But as I said, those can be handled with evidence and with proper issues being put into play, so that the legislation that comes into play about aided suicide or assisted suicide is within the right purview in terms of the law. Chikondi, over and out.
Thank you so much, Justice Ntaba, for such a beautiful response. And you're saying, let's first of all deal with the issue of criminalization of attempted suicide. That's our first point of call in dealing with the problem. And then we look at the other factors that force people to commit or attempt to commit suicide. So I would take the discussion to a different angle. My colleagues, if there are any burning questions on the chat, please let me know so that our panelists can address them, and also we can engage with the viewers and listeners. Now I have to go back to Justice Cherere, just to, maybe before I go to you, Judge, let me hear from area in terms of your experience in Ghana. I know in Ghana you've decriminalized attempted suicide, or you are working towards rather decriminalization of attempted suicide. So let's hear your experience and how that is going in Ghana.
Right. I think there was a question in the question and answer session that was along these lines of how Ghana got to this point and what the reactions were. The decriminalization happened, I think, in March or April. It's pretty new, right? But the advocacy, the conversation has been going on for years, for almost 10 years, if you will. A lot of work has gone into this. A lot of sensitization has gone into this. There was a lot of engagement with stakeholders and the public. There was engagement with judges. There was engagement with all kinds of people that are involved in mental health and issues of this sort, right? And generally, the public opinion is split on the criminalization of attempted suicide, where some people are of the view that it's wrong and it's trying to commit suicide is wrong, and criminalizing it is going to prevent it, and sending people to prison would deter others from attempting it. Right, I think that's the majority view on criminalizing attempted suicide. Even though research has shown that that's obviously is not a deterrent, it doesn't affect the numbers in any way. Those are the majority of the sentiments that are around these things. There's also the view that it's the religious view, which is it's against the religious tenets that Christianity, Islam, whichever religion that people belong to, it's frowned upon, it's wrong. Culturally, it's seen as a taboo. So there's a lot of misinformation, there's a lack of education on this. So that's what drives the opinion. That's what makes people push back against this being decriminalized. I think when it was introduced in Parliament, I think in 2019, a member of Parliament mentioned this. He said it was wrong. Decriminalizing it is going to increase the numbers. A lot of things against decriminalizing it, and there were others of the view that, well, we've not really seen that many people being convicted of attempted suicide, so let sleeping dogs lie. There's no point in decriminalizing it, even though there are reported cases of people being convicted, fined, imprisoned for attempted suicide. These were the sentiments that people had about it. But the way, I think that in these 10 years, what I noticed was there was a lot of education, there was a lot of engagement, right? And it came from stakeholders. A lot of work came from the University of Ghana, the Mental Health Authority. A lot of work came from civil society on just sensitizing, educating, letting us have the conversation, because of the fact that it's seen as a taboo. People don't want to talk about it. And that's very problematic because of the fact that people don't want to be sent to jail or arrested for attempted suicide. They're not likely to tell you that, oh, this happened to me because I tried to kill myself or the like. And this is problematic to both the person and the state, because for you, the person, you will not have the help that you need. People are not likely to help you because they don't know, right? And for the state, it's a problem, because if you don't have people reporting attempted suicide, you're not going to be able to have the statistics, the information that you need to inform you on the steps to take to prevent these things, right? So you'd have people come in and say, oh, it was an accident, it was so and so, and then that is a huge problem. It stands in the way of you finding out or finding ways of getting help. Apart from that, there's a huge problem with, like I said, stigmatization. I read of a story of this gentleman who was interviewed as part of a research program that went on somewhere in Ghana. I think this was in 2018 or so, where this gentleman was interviewed. He admitted to having suicidal thoughts and admitted to have attempted a couple of times. And due to the fact that he had admitted to it and then he had attempted, the community knew about it, he was stigmatized. And after the research, 2 months later, the people were informed that he had been successful in committing suicide. Now, this is a clear example of how bad the stigmatization is. People don't want to engage with you. People don't want to talk to you. People don't want to give you the opportunity to express yourself, to state, oh, this is the situation I'm going through. This is what is causing me to think this way. People don't want to help because they don't understand, right? So the great step here is the fact that Ghana has decriminalized it. And prior to the decriminalizing, I think I mentioned earlier that there's a Mental Health Act, which had made provision for checkups and people who had attempted suicide were supposed to be checked into mental health facilities and then given the help that they need rather than being criminalized. So that was enacted before the amendment, so that there has been provision for these kind of things. However, there's still room for improvement, because what decriminalizing has done or is going to do for Ghana is that it's going to give us the room and give people the room to speak out, right? And when you are able to speak out, the numbers, the statistics help. And then it helps it helps the state to put in the proper structures to prevent these things. Okay, then you know that, okay, these are the actual numbers we are dealing with. We need to invest more in our mental health facilities. We need to do this, we need to do that. So this is literally the first step to actually dealing with the problem of suicide. I don't know if this answers your question.
Absolutely. Elia, you do answer my question, and it's really exciting to see that at least another African country has actually decriminalized attempted suicide, considering that we all have a common problem where people look at attempted suicide as a taboo in our societies. And congratulations to Ghana for doing it. And if there is any research coming up here from April when decriminalization happened, in terms of whether decrim actually increases people's desire or attempts to commit suicide or not, please share that research work that's coming up. I think we have many more countries that still need to go through that process, and any research work coming from Ghana who has that experience of decriminalization would actually go a long way to helping other countries. So thank you so much for sharing your experience. There are a number of questions that have come through the chat from our participants. So I'm just gonna start with you, Justice Cherry. There is a question that's directed to you, which says, Justice Cherry, there has been moves and calls to decriminalize attempted suicide in Kenya. Has there been any public statement by the government in this regard? Judge, if you have a response to that.
What the government has done is that it set up a task force, sometimes in the year 2000, and its report was submitted to the president. And one of the recommendations was that attempted suicide ought to be decriminalized. And so what happened is that a bill was taken to Parliament under the Mental Health Act, and it failed for that reason. But since then, since 2000, the year 2000, our members of Parliament have not taken in another bill to decriminalize attempted suicide, and therefore it remains in our laws. But we are hoping that a petition that has been filed in the High Court, and which is pending determination, we'll be able to inform the government on what measures it ought to take, or if it directs that the attempted suicide be decriminalized, then we look forward to a time when the law will be amended and that the government will be able to take the necessary action to ensure that there is awareness and that people who attempt suicide are taken as people who need help and not as criminals. So far, nothing much has been done. The report has been lying there for the last 3 years, since the year 2000. And that is why the civil societies and the doctors are pushing the government now through the petition that is pending before the High Court. Because they have decided that that might be the shortest or the easiest way to get the law. And therefore, what they have done is that as they wait for the parliamentarians to settle down and decide when they want to submit the bill for discussion, then they have decided to use the petition, and we hope that soon, the petition is listed for hearing in November, and we hope that soon we'll have a favorable judgment, which will take us the gun away, where attempted suicide will be decriminalized. We look forward to that day when that will happen in Kenya. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Judge. And I'm also looking forward to that day. And I'm very optimistic that Kenya is also going to do it, because we have seen Kenya being in the forefront in developing jurisprudence around human rights issues, even on very controversial issues. So I don't see why Kenya cannot do it on this particular subject. So we are looking forward to going the Ghana way as well in Kenya. Thank you so much, Judge. There's one more question that I would want the panelists to take. I think this one I'm going to give to Justice Ntaba. The question says, in situations where decriminalizing suicide proves to be a difficult task, can diversion programs which serve as an alternative to conventional criminal prosecution and are intended to tackle the root causes behind an individual's interaction with the criminal justice system be effective in this context? Moreover, is this alternative approach even a viable option? Justice Ntaba, you can take that one.
I would say yes. There are already alternative approaches to the criminal justice system. And I think one of the things that when I do training for prosecutors, police officers, whether they're investigators or otherwise, is the fact that I think there's a lot that police prosecutors forget they have powers to do with when they are starting a criminal investigation. The power of diversion is actually in their, for instance, in Malawi, in the Police Act. From the beginning, you can question a person from the beginning at the police station before you even arrest them. And you can divert from that perspective. You can also divert them from that point of view. So for me, diversion is possible from the very start in terms of the police station itself. The second diversion can happen with the prosecutor. As a former prosecutor, you have a wide discretion of whether to prosecute or not. And even when you decide not to prosecute unattempted suicide, you also have the discretion as a public servant to actually offer other assistance, which includes the mental health aspects that we're talking about. And the mental treatment, I keep going back, despite that our Mental Treatment Act is very old, but it has parameters where a person can either be counseled to voluntarily go and seek mental health issues, or you can yourself look for a reception order for a person in terms of their safekeeping. And I think those are all parameters that we in the criminal justice system have to use in terms of persons we know have either have attempted suicide or have the probability of doing so. And lastly, when you come to the judges themselves, we have a whole array of possibilities in terms of how we can deal with the matter. We can decide that, I mean, it offers no assistance in terms of there's not enough evidence to actually for the offense that has come through, but also you can decide as a judge to actually offer treatment first and pend prosecution or determination of that prosecution itself. And I think those are all parameters that as we stand as judges or magistrates have the ability, as we stand as police prosecutors have the ability, as we stand as prosecutors in the DPP's office have available to us. But I think the biggest aspect for me in terms of the biggest alternative is teaching our first responders to actually stop reporting it to police and actually report it for the medical assistance that is first necessary. Because if that is done from the beginning, it means when by the time that is reported to police, the mental health aspect has been taken care of. And it is that would help whether you should prosecute that case and whether that a person may prosecuted can be found guilty of attempted suicide. And I think that's where our biggest position lies from. The alternative, it's not an alternative, it should be a guideline, and it should be a standing operating procedure that the first responders must be the ones to actually do the work before the rest of us in the criminal justice system come into play. And I think that's one of the things everybody forgets, that the medical professionals are also key justice responders. They're not outside the justice system, and they're not outside the criminal justice system itself. So that's what I would say in terms of that question.
Thank you so much, Justice Ntabo, for that response. Unfortunately, we are running out of time, and I wish we could address all the questions that are coming through to the panel, but let me just ask the panel a final question, and then we can wrap up. The next question goes to Justice Cherere. What do you think is the role of the courts in aligning criminal laws with international human rights standards? Justice Cherere. Are you there, Judge?
Sorry. Okay, sorry. There has been discussion in Kenya as to whether Section 2.2 that criminalizes attempted suicide is aligned to the Constitution, Constitution of Fundamental Rights and Freedoms. One of the sections, the right to equal protection, there is Article 27 of the Constitution of Kenya, says that provides for right to equal protection and benefit of the law for all citizens. And therefore, criminalization of attempted suicide raises an issue where those who attempt suicide are not treated equally as anybody else. Instead of being treated, they are treated as criminals, and therefore we might even lose them because, as has been said by one of the presenters, instead of responding to the issues as a medical issue, then we respond to it as a criminal issue. And therefore, we might end up losing these people to suicide finally. Then the right to, we also have one that provides for right to dignity under the Constitution. We also have Article 29, which provides the right not to be treated or punished in a cruel, inhuman, or degrading manner. Indeed, a person who is sick and is taken to hospital and chained to their bed, or is taken to jail, such a person cannot be said not to be treated, cannot be said to be treated fairly. Surely that is a person whose right to be treated and not to be treated in a cruel and inhuman manner has been violated. And also there is a right to the highest attainable standards of health. When we fail to take these people to hospital or to seek medical help for them, and instead treat them as criminals, then we deny them the right to that highest attainable standard of health that has been guaranteed by the Constitution. And also Article 26 defines disability to include mental health issues. And that is a right that has been guaranteed by the Constitution, and by criminalizing attempted suicide. Hello? I do not think that we as Kenyans are giving. Hello?
Harriet, if you can mute, please. Thank you. You can proceed, Judge. Judge, we can't hear you. You're muted.
Sorry. We also have Article 12 of the Convention of Rights of Persons with Disability. And as I've said, disabilities includes mental health issues. And therefore, a person who attempts suicide is a person in need of care and protection, and not a person who should be taken to court and finally prosecuted. And therefore, in Kenya, what we need to do is to ensure that the law is aligned with our own Constitution and also with the Convention of the Rights of Persons, so that these people, as has been said, instead of dealing with them as criminals, then we deal with them as people that require mental health care, so that instead of exposing them even more stress that they may end up finally killing themselves, then we help them to ensure that they get the help they want. And in such cases, if that is done, we'll be able to get help for them, and cases of attempted suicide will be treated as mental health issues and not as criminal cases. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Judge, for that. I'll also ask a similar question to Harriet in terms of the civil society perspective. Can you tell us what is the role of the civil society to decriminalize attempted suicide and align the criminal laws with international human rights standards? Over to you, Harriet.
Right, thank you for this. I think that this civil society has a very big role to play in all this. One of the major roles that they have played in Ghana was to sensitize the stakeholders. There were several sensitization, there were seminars and several educative platforms that were put up for judges, magistrates, stakeholders, parliamentarians. There was a lot of work from the civil society organizations to the job of the advocacy, the job of educating, the job of creating awareness on the implications of criminalizing attempted suicide, the implications of this crime or this offense on the state and on individuals, right? A lot of this work was done by civil society. They are the public, so a lot of the work was done by them. So I would say that they played a very huge role in ensuring that the attempted suicide was decriminalized.
Thank you so much, Harriet, for that. Let me also take you to some of the questions that are coming through, and I think I'll throw this one to, this one should come to you, Harriet, again, because you're a legal practitioner, so I think you would help us, but any of the panelists that feel to want to also address the question, you can go ahead. So the question saying, is it feasible to consider pursuing civil rights legal actions against government entities or law enforcement agencies on behalf of individuals who have been arrested due to the criminalization of suicide when their rights have been infringed upon? Here you can take that one up.
Well, yes. Earlier, I think a couple of years ago, someone had sent this thing had instituted an action on the constitutionality of the criminalization of attempted suicide. It was contested in the Supreme Court, and due to the way the law enforcement may treat people, you are also entitled to take that up in court. It's actually, I think I would much rather prefer that, because the more of such cases that we have in courts, the more the judges are inclined to look up on what to do about these things, right? And the more information we have on the topics. So I think that I would actually encourage people to institute actions against stakeholders, law enforcement, everybody that you feel has a hand in infringing upon your human rights by criminalizing attempted suicide. I would definitely say that it's a good step. It's a step in the right direction in advocacy, in getting people to actually learn the things that they are supposed to do. Because in this situation, you have the opportunity to bring forth the international best practices. You have the chance to bring forth your laws. You have the chance to criticize so many things, right, in the name of just through institution and action. So it's something I would definitely encourage.
Thank you so much for that response. I'm just going to read through some of the comments that have come through the Q&A session. There is, just one moment, I'm trying to scroll it up. Actually, it's a question that has come through from Mike Gamulanji, which says, what steps are being taken to ensure individual safety and well-being moving forward? Maybe this one I can throw to you, Dr. Bandawe. What steps are being taken to ensure the individual safety and well-being moving forward? Dr. Bandawe, over to you.
So there are a couple of steps. I think the most important is to ensure that the protective factors are brought forth. So for example, social cohesion, actually giving people tools to deal with the particular stressor that they are going through, overcoming or dealing or addressing the issues of stigma is very, very important. And when we do that, then we ensure that at least people do have that right, because today it's World Mental Health Day. So it's very important to, and one of the themes of World Mental Health Day today is, of course, the key theme is mental health is a universal human right. So everyone has the right to mental health. So we need to ensure that one of the key steps that we take is to protect the well-being of the individual. That is fundamental. And indeed, as Justice Ntaba said, that the primary respondents in the healthcare system should be the ones who are playing a very active role in ensuring that we focus on dealing with the individual, with the challenges that they have, instead of just rushing to report them to the police. At the end of the day, we want to ensure that every human being, because we are dealing with human beings, it's part of the lived human experience to go through stresses and challenge and get to a sense, or at times get to a place of hopelessness, but to give that hope, that purpose, that meaning to life is very important, primarily through educating people and making sure that we have mechanisms in place that will guarantee and support that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bandawe, for that response. And we have two interesting comments from Edward Gantusea. He says that the sense of belonging, but also enhanced system support for victims of attempted suicide, thereby reduction in cases of suicide. So essentially, he's agreeing with you, Doctor, that there is need for enhanced system support for victims of attempted suicide. His other comment says, do you know that even the church has a very awkward way of dealing with suicide death, to the effect that it propagates further discrimination? That's quite interesting. I don't know whether Helia, you would want to comment on that or say something at some point. And I saw another comment that came through from Victor Muhango, which says we need to train our magistrates. And I don't know whether Justice Ntaba, you'd want to comment on that as well. So maybe I can start with you, Helia, on the issue of the church, how the church deals with issues of attempted suicide death. Over to you, Helia.
So thank you for the question. The church, majority of the people from the religious point of view, the church still see it as something that should be looked down upon, frowned upon, not talked about. So there wasn't a lot of support from the church when this bill was put before Parliament. There wasn't much support from there because there's the issue of it being a sin and you sinning against God if you decide to, if you attempt to commit suicide. So there was a huge blowback from the church and generally from the cultural perspective, where it's seen as a moral wrong. So the way to deal with that, I think, is to have the conversations, to continue to engage, to continue to sensitize, so that people can see that it's not about the act, it's about the mental well-being of the person, because we don't have a lot of such conversations of the mental state of people, what is going on in your life, what is causing you to feel this way. So the more we have such conversations, I feel the more we'll be able to drift from seeing attempted suicide as a sin, and rather a cry for help or an indication of poor mental health, if you will. So to conclude, the church really did not support the decriminalizing, and the best way to deal with that is to educate, to have the conversations.
Thank you so much, Elia, for that response. Justice Ntaba, you deal with the comment from Victor Mhango that we need to train the magistrates. There's also an interesting comment that has come through from Alexius Kamangila, in which he says, my comment is that we need to be very careful when we speak of treatment for those that have attempted suicide. According to the UNCRPD, any treatment has to be freely and under informed consent. So issues of advice or treatment orders shouldn't even arise. Rather, engage the concerned on the options they have and let them decide by themselves, giving them all reasonable accommodation individually construed. Justice Ntaba, let's hear your thoughts around that comment and Victor's comment as well.
Let me start with a comment from Alex. And if you look at the Mental Treatment Act, it actually says there are all sorts of treatment orders you can do. Even the reception order, it says in what parameters you can do it. And as a court, you must remember reception order has to go through the court, the ones that we have. But there is a section in the Mental Treatment Act called voluntary reception order for yourself as a person who feels the need for mental health assistance. So I totally agree that informed consent is always important, but you must also understand that even from a perspective of a, and I'll go back to my medical days before I went into law school, is that there are certain times whereby a psychiatric hold is necessary. And Dr. Chiwoza Bandao will agree with me that there are certain times that even though there is talk about informed consent, but where there's a danger to your life, there will be parameters within the law that we must ensure that we protect your life. And that's why the right to life is one of those fundamental human rights that we have in the country, that everybody should be protected, even when you yourself don't feel like you want your life to go on. And I think that's where the issues, so informed consent is very important. And the Disability Act talks about it. The Mental Treatment Act says, if you can do it yourself, go ahead. But if you can't, these are the parameters. And I think that should be guided, as I said, by the medical issues as well as the law itself. In terms of the training, I think when we talk about training, one of the biggest fundamental issues that I feel we keep have to talk about capacity building is that we keep having to start capacity building at a level where people have already started working. For the magistrates, whether you talk about police prosecutors and all those, I think the fundamental issue for us to start with as countries that are dealing with mental health issues and suicide, and I'll go back and say suicide is a public health issue, which a lot of our countries are not dealing with them from a public health perspective. And if it's a public health issue, it means starting to deal with it needs to start from early on. People need to learn about mental health from primary school all the way up to college, you name it. And so fundamentally for all the key justice responders, it has to be fundamentally part of their induction training. And it must start from there, that you cannot only start when the person has started, but from the induction training. And that it requires that law school needs to have some level of issues of how to deal with that. If there's a police school, training school, it has to be in their curriculum. I was at nursing. Nursing has to also have a way of truly dealing with suicide, mental health issues, and especially suicide as a perspective for nursing, doctors, or any medical health professional that you're talking about. So yes, training is fundamental, but also not just training, but responsive training, human rights, and when I say human rights responsive training, is you must understand the dynamics of whether it's gender, disability, age, and all those things. And that has to be fundamental. And lastly, I will respond to one of Bradley's questions that he had put in. I said I would respond to what would decriminalization do actually in terms for the individual, especially in the communities? What it does is it takes away the stigma. If a person is not prosecuted, they do not go with the stigma of he was arrested because he tried to commit suicide. We have negative terms for people who've committed suicide. And it is fundamentally based on the fact that if we criminalize, we add on to that stigmatization of the person who's attempted suicide, but also the criminality issue. So that's the first point of call. The second issue is it does raise awareness. If you decriminalize, look at the work that we've done with Rogue and Vagabond. Look at the work that has been done on TB. Look at the work that has been done on HIV/AIDS in terms of decriminalization and what it has done in terms of the stigmatization and the discrimination levels. It has reduced it. And it is fundamental that we do that. And lastly, if you decriminalize, or if you find a way of putting it into a public health perspective, then you see that governments put into perspective the necessary programs, resources, whether it is from the executive legislature or judicial health issue, as opposed to a criminal issue, and thereby assisting in the promotion and the protection of rule of law. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Justice Ntaba, for that. I see that Ogechi has joined us. So I'll just read the last comment that's on the chat, and then I'll give Ogechi to say the last closing words. I know she was supposed to share the Nigerian experience with us, but we have a few minutes left, and we give her like 3 minutes to do that. The last comment that has come through saying, I'm of the opinion that churches can assume a significant role in suicide prevention when they undergo appropriate awareness and sensitivity training, considering their capacity to engage a wider community. They have the potential to partner with local mental health institutions, suicide prevention associations, and other community resources to champion improved mental health services and support systems. Such collaboration can result in a more comprehensive strategy for preventing suicide. Thank you so much for that beautiful comment. I hand over to you, Ogechi. 3 minutes for you. Thank you.
Thank you. I sincerely apologize for coming on late, and within the 3 minutes, I want to, state that going by, Nigerian laws as it is still today, there are provisions, that criminalize attempted suicide. Committing suicide is a crime. Attempted suicide is a crime. And as a country, I know that this is not, right, the way this is being handled, because it has been established that issues around committing suicide are related to mental health challenges, and most especially when we look at the fact that there are equally socio-economic issues related to this, which can cause depression and equally lead people to commit suicide. Now, most importantly, some provisions of our criminal code and the penal code allow persons that have committed any form of offense under state of mental illness to go free because they were not in their right frame of mind. So the argument is that if somebody that committed murder can plead mental illness and is set free, why then would some other person that has the same challenge and, because of that, attempted to kill himself or herself, be the one now to go in for the punishment? So we look at it as being discriminatory, and the fact again that these persons, instead of rehabilitating them, treating them, they are equally, sent into a place of custody against what our constitution equally says in section 35 about freedom of movement. So by mere fact that somebody is challenged mentally and has a little bit of issues psychologically, you are telling the person to be in protective custody. We find that to be quite discriminatory, and unfortunately, also the new National Mental Health Law of Act of Nigeria, which is quite progressive and very welcomed by the people, made robust provisions in terms of treatment and in terms of rehabilitation of mentally ill persons. But unfortunately, it did not make provision for how to handle persons that have attempted suicide and did not die at the end of the day. So it is still there in our laws. And what we are looking forward to and engaging further on, because right now there is a kind of harmonization of the criminal code and the penal code law acts of Nigeria, to see if this will be one of those crimes that will be removed from our statute books as a crime, so that this will be treated as it should. Although we know that in our country, there's so much religious and social and traditional, perspectives to the issue of committing suicide. But I believe that the right thing should be done, and alternative means of engaging with this in the meantime should be found, especially at least utilizing non-custodial measures, so that you can actually say that somebody that has such a challenge should go through this kind of, should be referred to the right place for treatment, and maybe some other thing done in the process to get that person healed. Once again, I want to apologize for this mix-up, although I knew as at the time I was informed that I had another event, but I looked at your time, not putting into consideration that Nigeria is 1 hour behind. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ogechi, and thanks for still making time and join. And your last words actually sum it up well for the discussion we've had for the 1.5 hours. And thank you so much for those insights and sharing your experience in Nigeria. And everything you've shared is similar to what we've been taught about Kenya, Ghana, and Malawi. And also the strategies that you have suggested are the things that have already come out from the panelists. So thank you so much for summing it up. That makes my work easier because I don't have to sum up the session, because you've done it for me. So thank you, Ogechi, for that.
Thank you.
And a big thanks to all the panelists for joining in, and for all the listeners and viewers for participating in this important webinar. Let's keep the discussion going on. A takeaway from this session: let's go the Ghana way and let's decriminalize attempted suicide. And Kenya, we are watching you. I think you're next on the line. So we are actually looking forward to more positives coming from Kenya and across the countries that are here, and everyone else that is listening. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining in, and I wish you a lovely evening and a good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.